Hey guys, how's it going? You know, it's the beginning of a new year. I'll be completely bald. Yellow Ackie, Reptile. Hey guys, how's it going? Today, we're going to be talking about 10 things a beginner Ackie Monitor keeper needs to know before getting one. So let's hop into it and we'll cover the 10 essentials. I'll go in order of what's most important. So you hear the most important stuff first. Number one, and the most essential, is heat. You need heat for them to live. That's pretty essential for a cold-blooded reptile. But basically, you're going to want a diverse range in your basking spot, at least 2 bulbs, and you want to get it to around 150 to 160 maximum. Use a retest stack if you can, or something that allows for diverse spots for basking where they can hit different temperatures. That's really important for these guys. They'll bask at all different ranges, so you want to kind of layer the basking spot and design it in that way. Now, I don't measure high-end temps for Ackie monitors. Their high-end temp is that basking gradient that we were just talking about. Their low-end, though, I like to aim for mid-75s to mid-85s, depending on the season. You'll lean more towards the 85s in the summer and more towards the 75s in the winter. And winter nights, it can get to about 70, 71, and that will be fine. So expect that, but that's the overall temperature design for the enclosure. At number 2, we have lighting. This is talking mostly about your UVB. I use a 14% with a reflective fixture in the back. This is Arcadia brand, and a 6% one in the front. You want them 2/3 the length of your enclosure, and you want it to be around Ferguson zone 3 or the intermediate zone between 3 and 4. I did a video on that recently if you don't know what I'm talking about, so check the top right for that. I am personally going off of the sunbeam method for my Ackies currently, where their basking area for their UVB is more concentrated. You could even have it into the low 7s for your UV index. So again, check out that video I just mentioned if you want to learn more about that. Now, most people are going to have to go off of distance, which is less than ideal since there's a lot of variables to it, but most people do not have solar meters, which is a couple $100s for a lot of people. So if you're doing distance, I recommend going somewhere 17 inches plus for 14%, and then maybe 13 or 14 inches plus for 12%. These are the Arcadia brands. And that's from the distance of your reptile's back. So you want to find the closest spot, add the amount that their height would normally be at, and then measure the distance between that and the bulb. Now, if you want to use a sunbeam method like I am doing, you could probably cut a couple inches off of that distance. So instead of 17 inches plus, it would be 15 inches plus for the Arcadia 14%, and instead of 13 or 14 inches plus for the 12%, it would be 12 inches plus. And that will allow for a more concentrated basking zone for UV. The 6% I use in front is definitely not a necessity. That is kind of optional. You can replace something like that with daylight tube lighting, something that simulates the closest to daylight that you could possibly get. That works too. You do get an extra kick from the 6% though, so if you're only using a 14% or something like that, then you might want to, no matter the sunbeam method or whatever, you probably want to stick to that 15 inches from the back and stay with that just to make sure you get a little bit closer since you don't have that extra buff from the 6%. Number 3, we have diet. Diet is obviously a very important thing, and you need to know that these guys are insectivores, meaning they eat primarily insects. Now, I'm not a big advocate of supplementing in some egg from time to time or a whole prey item. I think that's really not necessary, although at the same time, if you do it sparingly enough, it's probably not going to bring harm to them. The only time I use something like that is a pinky mouse whenever her female lays her eggs. So otherwise, I'm feeding a mixture of superworms, dubia roaches, crickets, grasshoppers, black soldier fly larvae, stuff like that. That's really what my Ackies are focused on eating. As babies, you'll feed these guys every day, but when they get older, you can have the option. You could feed them 3 times a week, or you can still feed them every day. It's really about the amount you offer per feeding. I'm sure you guys will look into that more so let's get on to the next topic. And with their diet, we have their supplements. These guys are pretty simple. In my viewpoint of supplements, I only do a dusting of calcium, no D3, and I do that on every feeding. I'm sure you could add in the occasional multivitamin, but if you're gut loading your insects correctly, there should be no need. And there should be no need for D3 either if you're offering the correct lighting and UVB setup. So that's all I do, pretty standard. Despite humidity being halfway down our list, do not undervalue humidity. This is probably the #1 problem-causing thing health-wise for Ackie monitors, is not having correct humidity. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around Ackie humidity out there, a lot we don't know. What you want to do is basically keep the substrate always constantly moist a couple inches from the top. This is why I suggest offering around 18 to 20 inches or more of substrate, especially for a female, since they will dig a little bit deeper when laying eggs. And yes, they can. If they're not with a mate, they can still lay infertile eggs. But you want to make sure your substrate is always wet and always moist. It would be cool if you had a humidity probe to go down there and measure it. That's really awesome if you do. Air humidity wise, there's quite a range. Some Ackie monitors do good in the 50-60%. Some prefer a boost into the 70%. I usually keep mine between 60 and 75% in the air, and that usually does well for most of my Ackies. And a quick pro tip on humidity before we move on, get a cheap watering can from your Lowe's. This is probably under $5, I forget. But I just fill it up to the 2-gallon mark, wherever that is on here. Right there, fill it up to 2 gallons, probably every week and a half to 2 weeks. Dump the whole thing throughout the entire enclosure, and that usually keeps my substrate at a good humidity level, good moisture level, and air humidity at a good air humidity level. So go with that. That'll probably work out pretty good for you. At number 6, we have substrate. Substrate is definitely a very important thing as well for Ackie monitors. A lot of people tend to offer too little. You really need at least 12 inches of substrate in these guys' enclosures for them to properly burrow, and even that's too little in my mind. 18 inches or more is really what I recommend and is ideal for these guys, especially a female, because of what I said earlier. I offer a range of 18 to 22 inches depending on where you measure in the enclosure. That's the range I offer. I recommend you do that. I know it's a lot of substrate, but it'll give them enough to burrow, enough of a moisture gradient in there for your humidity, and that really helps with refilling it. The less substrate you have, the more often you'll have to rehumidify it, which can be a pain and a problem sometimes. Otherwise, the mix, generally people like to do an organic topsoil and sand mix where you have 2 parts organic topsoil to 1 part play sand. That's what I did. Some people will add in some extra stuff here and there. That's pretty much in the US the acceptable mixture for your substrate. Real quick, another pro tip, you want to save on your substrate depth. Well, do what Scales 13 does and offer a dig/lay box depending on the gender of Ackie you have. Basically what you do is you take a bin, you fill it with the amount of substrate they normally should have, being 12, 18 inches, somewhere in that range, and then the rest of the enclosure, you can put a lot less substrate. So there might be reasonings behind this, space offer, do you want to offer more vertical space, but you could do that and that will work just fine. At number 7, we have another one that's often too much less than it really should be, and that's an enclosure size. For an adult Ackie monitor, I recommend no smaller than a 5 by 2.5 by 3 foot enclosure, where you should probably have 4 feet in height. Height's very important. As a baby, somewhere under a year or under 8 months, I think a 4 by 2 by 3 is acceptable, but it's probably cheaper just to dive into an adult enclosure off the bat, which is totally fine. Why is height really important? Well, think about the numbers we threw around thus far. We found out in lighting that you need to have 12, 15 inches from the back of your reptile. Then you want to offer at least a foot of space for them to do some vertical climbing since they are kind of semi-arboreal. And then you have a substrate where you want to offer at least 12 inches, and even that's a little less than ideal. All that, at minimum, you probably need 3 feet in height. Coming at you with number 8, we have health issues. You definitely should look into some of the common health issues of Ackie monitors before getting one. Luckily, this species is very hardy and you probably won't spend too much time in this step. The two big ones I want to mention real quick is the constriction of toes and the tail. This often happens with bad sheds and stuck sheds when the humidity is a little off. Humidity tends to give the most problems to this species, so that's why it's so important. So make sure they're not getting constricted, because they'll definitely pop right off if they do. Number 2 is gout. Genetically, this is what I see happen kind of often in terms of genetics and what they usually get as health problems. This can be seen as kind of puffy toes or puffy feet, definitely looking swollen, and they might have a little bit more mucus. They might have an enlarged liver. Large livers are definitely something I've seen from time to time in Ackies with bad genetics. So keep a lookout for that. They'll probably be dehydrated as well. That's another symptom of gout or something they deal with. So those two things are probably the biggest one I observed, but there's probably a couple more I would keep an eye on. Next, we have enrichment. Enrichment is essential for their lives and definitely something you as a keeper should be offering. And we're not talking about offering dog toys for them to problem solve on, which is something you could definitely do, and I have a video on that in the top right, so check it out. But you can do environmental enrichment. That will keep them physically active and mentally stimulated, which is exactly what you want. Give them things to climb on. Give them things to check out, crevices. Let them look for their food. You can throw in their different inverts for eating and have them hunt it down. All that gives them mental stimulation and keeps them physically doing stuff. So definitely look into different ways to add enrichment to your monitor's life. It'll be something very good for them. And lastly, number 10, you're going to want to look into taming methods. I've done various videos on taming methods. I'll plug one in the top right here. I keep pointing to the wrong area, so I'm not even going to bother, even though I just did. But basically, you want to learn about how to earn their trust and respect and how to get along with them in their environment and in your environment. It's going to be quite the process, and don't expect things to happen overnight, especially for babies. They tend to go into this fight or flight stage where they're just kind of constantly scared. You still want to work towards taming with them though, and there's ways you can do it that will work just fine. Just being active in their environment, getting them used to your noise level around the enclosure. Don't put them in a bubble, I guess, is what's essential here. You want to make sure they understand you and your actions and make sure they feel safe around those actions. So check out one of those videos, since I can go on and on about taming and different methods you can employ, but I've already done so in various 10-minute plus episodes. And that's the 10 things a beginner Ackie Monitor keeper should know before getting one. Let me know if you have any to add in a comment below. Otherwise, let's get into some announcements. Shout out to the patrons. We have new patron Toothy Chicken. We also have Herp M, David T, Angela L, Smooth Cat Hex, Cat and Rick, Darian J, Ellen M, and Stephanie S. I really appreciate your support. You guys too can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. Check the top right for more information. Tier 3, get you on my forehead. Also, while you're at it, check out Reptile links. You can get $5 off your first order of Reptile links by using code ProfessorHerp at checkout. We have a direct link in the description below that automatically applies to that code for you. That's my main staple diet for Frappuccino, my Tegu, but you can also give them the hognose snakes, blue tongue skinks, and more. Definitely check them out, a nutritious staple for your reptiles diet. Alrighty guys, that's the end of the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't. I'd really appreciate it. Check out the merch as well. That's to the left of my head, right of your screen. Teespring link in the description below, and I'll see you next time.